Welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show with local and national thought leaders on issues impacting the Black community. Now introducing our host, Miss Ann Marie Sorrell.
Welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders. I am your host, Ann Marie Sorrell, President and CEO of the Mosaic Group. Thank you so much for taking your afternoon to join us today. Before we start our broadcast, I want to thank our sponsors for making this broadcast possible, Broward Health and the Florida Lottery. We have a very special guest today, one of my favorite people in education, Dr. Gregory Haile, who is the president of Broward College.
Hey, Ann Marie, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing incredibly well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here today, and an honor, actually. I've seen your work in the community over the years. I've seen what you've been doing as president of Broward College. I think we're both fellow Leadership Florida alum.
That's right. That's right.
So it's good to be in your presence, sir.
The feeling is very mutual. You're a tremendous leader, and I'm grateful for you and Legacy doing this incredibly important work at this time. It couldn't be more needed, and I'm so glad you're reaching out to folks who otherwise might not get this information. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, for those who don't know about you, Dr. Haile, I am going to just read your bio, and I know this is like the abbreviated version of it. So you're the 7th president of Broward College. You assumed the role on July 1st, 2018. Prior to this appointment, President Haile served as the general counsel and vice president of Public Policy and Government Affairs for Broward College from September 2011 to June 2018. Prior to joining Broward College, he was a corporate litigator. Gregory Haile is a public servant, community leader, and an accomplished educator. He has championed his community by serving in over 35 board and committee capacities and in over 20 chair or president or vice chair and president positions. And he is currently the chair of the board of Leadership Florida. Thank you for your leadership of Leadership Florida, of course. He has also received dozens of recognitions for his leadership service and excellence in his profession. He routinely serves as a keynote speaker at events, primarily speaking on the transformational power of higher education. As an educator, Mr. Haile takes time annually to teach a self-designed 4-credit course in higher education law and policy at Harvard University during the summer. He previously served as an adjunct professor with Broward College, teaching business law and ethics, and with Miami-Dade College, teaching business law. Mr. Haile was educated at the Columbia University School of Law, where he was a Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar and served as the editor-in-chief at the National Black Law Journal and as an editor of the Journal on Gender and Law. He received his bachelor's degree from Arizona State University, where he graduated magna cum laude and received the Most Outstanding Graduate Award in his college. He is also a fellow of the Vanderbilt University Higher Education Management Institute. Whew.
You are very kind. I almost wish it was shorter, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, I think it's important for us to definitely celebrate our accomplishments and our accolades. So kudos to you for everything that you've accomplished. So let's talk about President Haile. Please share with us a little bit of your journey to higher education.
Sure. Well, it's probably appropriate to start there because oftentimes people will hear the accolades and think that your life started with accolades. And, that certainly wasn't the case with me. I was not blessed with the privilege of living in South Florida, a place that I absolutely love. I actually was born and raised in Queens, New York, and in an area called South Jamaica, Queens, New York. And I grew up there during the 80s and 90s. And it was a very challenging neighborhood. And those challenges were heightened in light of the fact that it was at the height of the crack epidemic when I was growing up there. So if I could paint somewhat of a picture, the home across the street from mine had boarded up windows and there were drugs routinely being sold out of that home. I had bars on every single window of my home. I've had a bullet come through my living room window. I've lost friends. I could go on and on, but the reality was it was a very difficult climate and environment that was saturated with violence, unfortunately. And but one of the things that changed my life, particularly as you speak to the path towards higher education, was my mother had lied about my neighborhood, my address actually, so I could go to school in a better neighborhood. And unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that would get you in tremendous trouble today, and perhaps even then. But she did it because she thought it was going to be the right thing to do. So I ended up going to school in a neighborhood, probably about 45 or so minutes away. I go through the projects, get on the bus, walk after taking the bus, and finally I would get to school. And I started in about third grade, and then in the sixth grade, I'll never forget, and I share this often because of the powerful influence it had on me, is that it was 1989 and I was graduating from elementary school. And it was the sixth grade, and I said to a friend, "Isn't this amazing? We're going to be the last class of the decade." And this friend immediately says to me, "No, we're going to be the last class of the millennium because we're going to graduate college in 1999. And being that I had never had a family member go to college, certainly not graduate from college, we didn't have conversations at the dinner table about college. That was the first time that I had ever even heard the word college.
Wow.
And here we are, one gentleman, one young man, young child in the sixth grade, who knows exactly what year he's going to graduate from college and unwittingly exposes to me a peer in the same grade who had never heard the word before." And I think about how that disparity exists in so many different places and in so many different ways. And we don't think about it that much. And it's something that we need to continue to bring to light, that there was nothing inherently more talented about that individual than me. There was nothing inherently that would make him more likely to go to college or more successful in college, but clearly the exposure to the opportunity had changed his mindset. That mindset for me had simply never existed. And even then I wasn't truly understanding of what that could mean or what it did mean, but it was exposure that fortuitously was blessed upon me, and otherwise, who knows how long I would have been waiting for that exposure. And my mother persisted to kind of provide this false address narrative through middle school. And then by the time I was applying for high school, it became clear to the schools that she was trying to tell this story to the high schools that I was not from those communities and that I did not have the grades. I mean, my mother and my stepfather, for that matter, shot me around to every high school other than the high school that I was zoned for, because the high school that I was zoned for was known to be one of the very worst. To paint a little bit of a picture, it was selected as one of the first 40 schools throughout New York City that would be required to have metal detectors. It was considered, and I always wonder how they had this data, but to have the highest teen pregnancy rate and one of the highest HIV rates. And but I went to the school, had nowhere else to go. And clearly that was another tough environment to be engaged with on a day-to-day basis, where frankly academic interests were not the highlight of my experience. For many of us, it was making sure that we were getting home safely and surviving the day. And so I ended up graduating from Springfield Gardens High School. Unfortunately, the high school was broken up years after I graduated. It was a dropout factory. They probably did the right thing, unfortunately. But I ended up going to Arizona State University for undergrad, as you mentioned. And I actually went there sight unseen. Here I was in South Jamaica, Queens, leaving to go across the country. And I didn't know, again, because I was going to be a first generation college student, I did not know that you're supposed to visit the schools before you go there. I just had no clue of that. I applied, I got in. And one of the reasons I applied there, frankly, there were two reasons, material reasons. One, because it was far and I wanted to get away from the environment that I was in. But the second reason was because you had to have two of three criteria. Three criteria were you had to have a decent SAT score, which I had. You had to have at least a 3.0 or 3.25 GPA, which I did not have. I had a 2.7 GPA coming out of high school. But the greatest irony of my 2.7 GPA, and this satisfied the third criteria, is that you had to be in the top 25% of your class. I was in the top 15% of my class with my 2.7 GPA in high school, and never recognized the incongruity of those numbers until much later in life. So I go to Arizona State University sight unseen. I learned for the first time that I'm going to be required to take remedial education, which for those who don't know, essentially means that you may be in college, but you are not college ready in certain areas. And probably the greatest discomfort I'll remember is that I was so used to a life that was surrounded by bars and metal detectors. I told you about my home. I told you about my high school. When I went to the movie theaters in my neighborhood, we had to go through metal detectors. When I went to the bodegas in my neighborhood, I was so used to having 2 layers of bulletproof glass between the vendor and the customer. And here I show up to a college sight unseen, and there are no metal detectors. There's no bulletproof glass in the neighborhood. And if you can imagine this, all I can imagine is how can I be safe in this environment? Fortunately, I was able to get past that with the help of a lot of people, faculty, other students who I would come together with, advisors, deans, so many folks who lent a helping hand to me. I graduate from Arizona State, move on to Columbia and do well enough there. And then I actually visit South Florida for 4 days with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we decided to move to South Florida. Almost sight unseen, but I started my career as a corporate litigator. And I actually enjoyed the work. It was intense. I can be an intense person. I love hard work. I believe it's a difference maker in everything we do, and certainly that was required of me. But I also got heavily engaged in the community. As you mentioned, I served on another number of boards and committees. And I remember confiding in a good friend, and I started talking about all the things that I've been involved with, but thinking if there was one thing that I could do that I would love to do, what would it be? And I kept coming back to education because it was clear to me that the greatest, other than the love and support of my family, the greatest change and impact in my life was because of my educational experience. It was the leap into post-secondary education where I could start to feel free of looking over my shoulder every day, where I could start to focus on academic excellence and learning and how I could better my life, despite the challenges that I may have experienced previously. And then I got the ultimate blessing of starting to work at Broward College on September 12th of 2011. And I'll never forget that day because it was a day that everything changed for me. I knew very early on that I wanted to be in this space for the rest of my career. I thought about the students at Broward College, just like me, who were Pell Grant recipients, just like me, who were first generation college students. And they're trying to figure out how to make the greatest difference in their lives. They know this is the right avenue, but they're struggled between their start and the finish line. And to be able to play some role every day in their lives has made a great difference in my own. And it's been an absolute blessing to be in this space. And certainly when I was called upon on May 9th to serve as the president of Broward College, May 9th of 2018, by far the greatest blessing I've ever had in my career.
Wow. And I want to highlight, because when we're talking about legacy leaders, if I'm not mistaken, you're the first Black president of Broward College?
That is correct.
How has that experience been for you, and why is that significant in 2020?
I think the critical element of the significance is the perspective. One of the things when I talk to our students is the importance, and I talk to all of my colleagues about this, and they do such a great job as well, is students knowing that you can be a first generation college student and make it without necessarily having the clearest roadmap or understanding. One of the things that I reflect upon is that I didn't have a network to seize upon to say, how do I do this? How do I make it through this? Yeah. Just like many of our students, it'd be so wonderful for all of us to be able to have a phone call with our parents and say, hey, Mom, how did you navigate this? But oftentimes we don't have that. So I'd like to think that being able to bring that perspective to our students and our community helps elevate our students in terms of how they see themselves and their capacity to change their lives. And even more so, perhaps, those who are not students yet. As you know, there are so many folks in our community who have the capacity, they have the ability, they have the character, but they don't necessarily see the opportunity, or perhaps even worse, they have doubts about their capacity to achieve. When I was in high school, I had a teacher tell me in a room full of 30 students that if I ever made it to college, I would never survive.
Wow.
Now, that story, there's a version of that story being told every single day.
Yes.
And so one of the important things that I and many others at our institution bring, and I always tell our folks to bring it, is don't be afraid to share the challenges that we've been exposed to. I'm here in a suit. You described my academic background and some accolades, but no one starts there.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about the challenges that we've seen, particularly when we know that there are students who may be walking blind a little bit about how this works and whether they can achieve. And again, especially those who may not be students yet, but have all the talent and ability to make the same difference in their lives.
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing your journey, because I really think it lays the framework for what we're about to talk about next, which is the BrowardUp Movement, which is your vision. I had the privilege and opportunity to work with your team on helping kick it off and do some market research, and to see where it's come along to in such a short period of time. Let's talk about the BrowardUp Movement, which you recently launched as your brainchild, your baby, your passion. And now I really see where that passion is coming from. So how did this come about? And what is the BrowardUp Movement? How did it come about, and why is it so important?
Yeah. So, I'll harken back a little bit to think about how fortuitously I learned about college, as I shared earlier. And in my view, it should never be that fortuitous. It should not be a matter of luck that we learn about what I consider to be the most powerful fulcrum to economic success, to independence, to transforming your life. And when I was seeking this position as president, I remember talking to our board as they go through a very broad public interview process, and sharing with them that I believe that it was incumbent upon us to manifest our mission in an even greater way, and not just to be conscious of all the students that we have. I mean, we're one of the largest institutions in America with 63,000 students, and we've won so many accolades. But how do we make sure that we are just as conscious about those students who are not with us, but perhaps should be? And so one of the things that I started talking about was the need to actually go into communities that need us most. And when I say go into, I don't mean bounce in and out of. I don't mean go there for a Saturday or once a month. I say, how do we live in those communities that need us most to make it inevitable that they will see what post-secondary education is and understand that that is an opportunity to transform their lives. So what we started to do was partner with organizations, and so much of this requires gratitude of so many. I'll start with the Urban League. When we started this work, what we did was we reached out to the Urban League, and as you know, the Urban League is in the heart of some of our most challenged communities, and they serve some of our most challenged communities. And so we talked to the president of the Urban League, Dr. Jermaine Smith-Ball, and said what we'd like to do is provide post-secondary opportunity at the site of the Urban League in the heart of a community that needs us. This makes it very, very, you have to think about removing barriers. If someone has to take 2 buses to get to you, they may not get to you, right? If someone has to find ways to navigate childcare as well as 2 jobs and knows that post-secondary opportunity could change their lives, but don't have the ability to get there, well, then we haven't done much. We have to own the challenges of our community. And so what we did was we went to the Urban League. We started providing post-secondary education courses at the Urban League site. And immediately the community was going there. They knew immediately there was an opportunity to change their lives through certification programming. And just imagine for a moment, if I talked to you about where Broward College was 2 years ago, and I showed you a map, you would see a map where our locations were essentially not anywhere near those communities that we know we exist to serve. And so what we've done over the last 2 years is add 19 different locations by way of partnership in the 6 zip codes and 12 cities that need us most. And let me tell you how we've described those from a data perspective. We identified those communities, those cities, those zip codes that have the highest unemployment rate and lowest post-secondary attainment rate. And we decided we would smother those communities. And now, in just over 2 years, we served over 2,000 students. The latest I saw was 2,067 students, 500 certifications at least already provided. And we're hearing these amazing stories where people weren't working and they came and got their certification, and now they're making $50,000 a year. And we're hearing this over and over. And I'll tell you one other really important part of this is that we have to be conscious of having proximity with our communities that need us most. We can't just show up and then leave. And the proximity key is so important because, as I mentioned to you before, I was the first generation college student, didn't have conversations. I actually was in one of our communities, 33311 zip code. It is considered to have more individuals under 18 in poverty than any other zip code in the state of Florida. And so early on in my tenure, I started knocking on doors in the community. And I said, my name is Greg Haile. I'm the new president of Broward College. I want you to think about coming to college and tell your community, tell members, tell kids. And one gentleman said to me, I can't go to college because all I know how to do is fix motors. And I said, sir, don't you know we have a great automotive program? If you went through this program, you could be making $50, $60, or $100,000 in a matter of 5 years. Or, sir, did you know we have an aviation maintenance program? It's one of the most important industries we have, and there's tremendous growth opportunity. Did not know that, was shocked by it. I talked to another gentleman. I said, you should think about coming to college, same spiel. And he says to me, oh, I can't go to college because I've been to jail. And I said, no, that's not true. Think about all the myth busting that we have to engage in. You don't do that by bouncing in and out. You have to be engaged. You have to knock on doors, and you have to live in those communities so that when someone is going from their home to the bus stop, they can't help but see college and notice it. And I'll give you one other story just really quickly around this, is that we've worked with many municipalities as well as many nonprofits. And one of the greatest ideas didn't come from Broward College. It came from one of our cities, the city of West Park. And they said, you know what? They were one of our partners in which we've leveraged space that they have, and we're in there providing post-secondary attainment. And they said, do you have any flags? And we said, actually, no, we don't really, but tell us what you're thinking. And they said that right next to their flag of the city, they want to raise Broward College flags throughout the city because they want people in their community to know that college is right in their backyard. And maybe, unlike me, who had to learn about it fortuitously, they're planting the seed so that when some child perhaps sees that flag and says, what's college to someone, that we sparked a completely different mindset of what is possible for that individual's family. And if we do this really well, that community.
Oh man, you're giving me chills with this conversation because and when one of your team members, Steve Gross, called me and said, hey, Ann Marie, we have a project and I know your firm is going to be perfect for it because of what you guys do in the community. And I went in and I met with him and he kind of gave me the rundown. And I said, oh my God, I have been saying this to different clients for so long that it's so important, whether it's education, healthcare, or any type of service, that we bring the service to the community because everyone expects the community to come to them. And so to hear what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the impact that it's making in the stories, and people won't believe these stories, right? They won't believe the challenges that people have in just attaining an education, attaining a certificate, or just getting out of the mindset that I cannot. For whatever reason, I cannot, but you being able to go knock, first of all, you go knock on the door as the president of the college is unheard of, number one. So kudos and thank you for doing that. But for you to go knock on the doors and hear the people's story and then be able to share them, no, we have a solution for you. That is amazing. Do you see this being a model, a national model, and a new standard in higher learning?
Yeah. I think there's certainly the opportunity. You know, one of the things that about what we've done, as I mentioned, it's been so partnership based, and there are so many members and leaders of the community who've played a material role in this work, yourself included. One of the things that is clearly replicable, in my view, is being able to leverage this partnership model. You know, when I started this conversation, most people said to me, "Well, great idea, but where are you going to get the money to build the buildings? Right? You're already underfunded. The state's revenues are down. How are you going to do that?" And so that was never a part of my mindset, but that's the instinct that many people have. And so I would suggest that the instincts needs to be, how do we make sure that we work with our community partners to create these opportunities? I've talked to you about 19 new locations, and we did not spend anything on capital infrastructure. This was around leveraging partnerships. And I think about the kinds of partnerships that these could be available for, not just in Broward, but beyond. Think about, we have a partnership with the county library system. We have 32 municipalities, 31 cities in Broward County. There are 37 libraries, at least one in each city. And by the way, most of those libraries are very much underutilized. And this is a national story about our public libraries. They're underutilized, but they have space, they have the technology infrastructure, they're located in the neighborhoods that we could be working in. And what I'm describing to you is certainly nothing that is limited to Broward County or Broward College. This is the kind of perspective I think can be brought in other communities. And I'll take it a little bit further. As we think about how we make sure we lift communities, all communities, so that everyone can engage in the benefits of post-secondary education, which include recognizing that the more post-secondary education people have, they live longer. They have greater life expectancies. They're healthier. They're less likely to go to jail. They're less likely to lose their jobs. If they lose their jobs, they're more likely to get a new job quicker. There are so many elements of what happens, in addition, of course, to fundamentally being able to make more money over your lifetime. All of these things tie into that. And as we think about as a community, particularly in a climate that unemployment is higher than it should be, we know it's as a result of a pandemic and the economic downturn, but in our challenged communities, the unemployment rate has always been materially higher than it has been on a county-wide basis or on a national basis. And so the question for all of our communities today, how do we make sure that we are engaging this work, because we know it is a benefit to the entire community. It lifts gross domestic product for our community. It helps with unemployment for our community. There is untapped talent that needs to be tapped into. I'll share this one point. When I was working on this long before the pandemic, and our team was doing such a great job of moving this work forward, many employers at a time when the unemployment rate in Broward County was 2.5%, they would say, I can't find the talent. Mm-hmm. And my response to them was, well, where are you looking?
Right.
Because this zip code here has 10+% unemployment. They have the talent, will, and probably more grit than anyone you could ever imagine. And so why aren't you there? And allow us to be that conduit. I understand there's an acculturation process to this, but allow us to be that conduit. We will make sure they get the tools they need. You make sure that you leverage the grit that they can provide to you and your enterprise. That's where you see the connection. Even a corporation must learn and understand it has to play a role in driving every community support, because even for them, it can make the greatest difference in their own bottom lines.
Well, what I love is that you have the community partnerships, you've engaged the business community, you've engaged your economic development partners. Now, for someone who has a family member or who lives in the zip codes that that these 19 locations are now in, how do they now go about accessing education through Broward College, through this BrowardUp movement? Are there scholarships available? Kind of walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that's really critical is we have these workshops that help people overcome these myths. We have myth busting workshops, if you will. And so before I'll tell you exactly about how the cost is covered for individuals, even when you are going to a full credit or when you're coming to college, it is incredibly affordable. And I'll say this, if you come from the lowest levels of the income ladder, you actually can be what's called a Pell recipient, a Pell Grant recipient, which is what I was. I was a Pell Grant recipient in college. And what that means is the federal government will provide costs to cover your cost of education. If you are a Pell recipient, you can have up to 100% of your cost of going to Broward College covered, and then some, because the cost of going to Broward College is so little. But I also recognize that sometimes people don't get that or get that far or want to pay attention to it. So what we've done is, for our BrowardUp programming, we are offering it 100% free of cost. 100% free of cost, no ambiguity, no question. every single student I've described to you has taken their courses or received their certification at no cost to them. And when I talk about partnerships, that's because there have been donors who have come forward and said, we want to make this difference with you. Mm-hmm. They recognize the need, they recognize the return, and now they're seeing it in the most tangible ways with individuals getting their jobs. So as I think about those who could be BrowardUp students, who could, again, attain a certification at no cost to them, they're welcome to reach out to us. What we've done is we've actually converted this to an online platform. It didn't stop us. Of the 2,000 students, 600 have been served since the inception of the pandemic, and we continue to move forward, offering more and more certifications in areas of health sciences, supply chain management, all which are in high need, even in this environment, and that can help make a tremendous difference in their lives, again, at no cost to the student.
That is awesome. And I was going to ask you what impact the pandemic has had on Broward College as a whole, and then particularly with the BrowardUp movement.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, it's been a challenge for us, just like it has been for everyone else. We went to a fully remote environment in March, very early March, and I have to give tremendous credit to our faculty and advisors. We took 63,000 students and 3,300 course sections and moved them into a remote environment, and in a week's time. And I must say, the most important element of what happened at the inception of the pandemic is to wonder, how did our students do? And what's great is our students continue to perform well. And that's because of the flexibility of our faculty and advisors and our staff as it related to ensuring that our students, despite not just the change in how we delivered education, but the change that was happening in their lives. Our average student is 27 years old. 52% of our students are Pell eligible students. Many of them have families. Many of them are part-time, and they had just as much turmoil in their lives as anyone else, but surely we're able to keep going. And that's been wonderful. As we look at the future, we've been able to leverage this quite a bit. And I'll tell you what that looks like. There could have been a moment where I asked faculty members about, would they be willing to teach in a remote environment? And many of them would have been reticent to do so. Same thing with our employees. Well, there's been a greater level of comfort with that. And now, in fact, I have to extend some thanks to my board of Broward College. Just this week, they agreed to an engagement that will allow us to dramatically increase the number of online degrees that we can offer by 30. They've also allowed us to dramatically increase the number of textbook-free degrees that we can offer. And let me tell you what that means.
Yeah.
The average student spends $1,234 a year on textbooks, which can be a lot of money, okay, obviously, for many people. And so when we get to deliver this without any textbooks that require cost, but we can do it digitally, again, we change the dynamic for our students. We have students who will not buy the textbooks for classes because they're so expensive. And that, of course, is going to impact their student success and our ability to make sure that they get the greater lives that they seek. So when we eliminate the cost of textbooks completely by having digital online text that we can use for courses, we make an invaluable difference to our students. These are great examples of how we've been able to take this environment, take this experience, and make ourselves even stronger in terms of serving our students.
No, that's amazing. And I know we're getting short on time, but I want to ask this question because I think it's so important, especially in this environment, as technology is changing constantly and even more rapidly since the pandemic. What are some of the key programs and initiatives that are cutting edge, that's challenging your students to think outside the box, to think 10, 15, 20 years into the future? So that's part one of the question. And then part two, when we talk about talent and the economic development engines that look to attract companies to South Florida, how does Broward College play a role in being proactive in developing talent that will kind of shape who comes to South Florida, who comes to Broward County?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I'll actually start with the second. It's a really critical role for us to ensure that we can provide the talent for those corporations, organizations that seek to build here, as well as those who are currently here. And this requires a unique level of nimble activity. That means being able to anticipate, to work with our employers, work with our partners, and anticipate the direction that they need to make sure that we're working in concert with them as the economy changes, as the workforce environment changes, so that we can be sure to provide them with the talent as well as the curriculum to satisfy what the needs are going to be for those corporations. It is something we work hand in hand with. Our economic development organizations include the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. Of course, we work with organizations like the Broward Workshop, the Chambers of Commerce, all incredibly important organizations in which we work hand in hand with to ensure that we are developing and tooling up the talent that's going to meet their needs. And certainly when it's about attracting talent from outside the state of Florida or outside of the county, we work arm in arm with those organizations as well as they do that. Now, the first part of your question also ties to the second, and that is around how we're educating our students. One of the things that we're incredibly proud of is what we've launched called the BC Entrepreneurial Experience. So one of the things that we have to be very careful about, all of us, whether we're employers, employees, and certainly institutions of higher education, is to make sure that people are prepared for what is next and can anticipate it. What we don't want is our students to move into the workforce and to be subject to the fluctuations in the economy without recognizing where it is going. We want our students to anticipate these changes. Just think very simply. We have more and more corporations as a result of this pandemic, the economic downturn, that have decided that they will accelerate the use of artificial intelligence to frankly, inevitably displace many employees. What we don't want is for an employee to be blindsided by that. What we want is, as a higher education institution, hopefully as employers who recognize the import of making sure that everyone in our community who wants a job can get one, is to say, how do we make sure when we know that 5 years from now, and perhaps less at this point, that the likelihood of having a cashier at your local grocer continues to decline, the likelihood of having a McDonald's where you have people serving you is likely to decline. In fact, we know that Burger King is now launching a touch-free store very, very soon if it hasn't been done now. And so the question becomes two things. One, how do we as Broward College work with employers or other higher ed institutions, work with employers to help communicate with employees what the future holds and build that off-ramp? But when they're with us, right, when they're going through Broward College programming, this has been incredibly exciting. They go through our entrepreneurial experience. We make sure that as we are grooming them for the future, that we are tooling them to be able to anticipate those changes before they occur. We want to make sure that they can also take advantage of them. They won't be subject to it. They need to be those who are creating the opportunities, who are helping leverage what they've learned to create the new product, the new idea, or the expansion of a business model, or the shift in a business. All of those things are things that they must be tooled to learn. It's part of the ongoing education that one must continue to incur. Not graduate and never see Broward College again, but graduate and continue to upskill so that they can, again, be creators of change and not subject to that change. It's an incredibly important part of what we're doing. And it also is important to our community because a lot of time that change, that anticipation of that change is not there and they're being subject to it. So we need to change that paradigm. And it's a great part of the work that we're doing, preparing our students as well as employers. And of course, for those who want to start their own businesses, this is a great tool for them as well to learn how when you start your business, don't be who you were on day one, on day 365. There should be iterations of growth that continue to happen as you build your business, hire employees, and make sure your employees is just as tooled up as you are.
Absolutely. I love that. And that brings me talking about business, and then we'll make this a quick question. You have a supply diversity program.
Yes.
So for anyone looking to do business with Broward College, what do you buy? And then how do they go about becoming a vendor and a part of this supply diversity program?
Yeah, well, we buy a lot. We are a very large organization with 5,000 employees serving 63,000 students. So in all likelihood, you name it, we buy office supplies, food. We have HVAC, chiller and service maintenance needs, plumbing, signage, print and graphics, landscaping, you name it. I mean, there's just so many things that we buy. We have a great leader in Anthea Pennant with us. And so she's just absolutely extraordinary and laser focused on this work. In fact, we had set a goal of diversity spend of 17% in 2020, and we actually got to 21.5% despite the pandemic. And so we continue to grow. It is a major focus for us. It is a focus that we measure. We hold ourselves accountable for. And the Office of Supply Diversity is actually in the process of launching a campaign to engage more departments to buy more goods and to diversify the sale of those goods. So it's an important part of what we do, and I have to shout out that we've been winning awards left and right under Anthea's leadership. In fact, in 2020, this year, the Florida State Minority Development Council recognized Broward College with the Local Corporation of the Year award in the state of Florida. So this is a critical part of who we are, what we're doing, and of course, we expect to see continued growth.
Congratulations on that. So what's a golden nugget, a takeaway that you want to leave with our listeners today?
You know, I would suggest, obviously, we are in a very unique time, you know, with a confluence of challenges relating to the pandemic, relating to the economy, and of course, relating to equity and equality. And so I would suggest that despite this, think about what's on the other side and to keep being hyper aggressive about tooling yourself up to make sure that that you're prepared for all of the opportunities that exist. And I'll just harken back. I had many doubts about my likelihood of success in college. And I'd even tell you that early in my career, I had many doubts about my likelihood of success. And I persist and hope that you persist in overcoming any doubt that enters your mind. Right now, there are so many challenges before us, but I ask you to think about the challenges that you've been through. I'm sure we've all been through something and we've made it through it. And perhaps it is those challenges that have made us stronger. And I think about the challenges that I continue to leverage, even as we go through this, and recognize that if we can get through what we've been through, then nothing can stop us. And I believe in that wholeheartedly, whether it's our students, our communities, or those who I've never met or touched. The capacity to achieve is within you.
Wow. Well, this has been amazing, 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 President Haile. We could go on for probably a couple of hours with this discussion, but I know you're a very, very busy man and you have to go back to the business of higher learning.
Sure. But I do appreciate this. This has been incredible, Ann Marie. Thank you so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to share the work of Broward College and my incredible colleagues.
Absolutely. So just stay with us for just a second longer. Next week, we will be joined by Mr. Sandy Michael McDonald, who's the Director of Economic and Small Business Development for Broward County, to learn about all the different opportunities that are happening in Broward County for businesses. And of course, the next issue, which is going to be highlighting our healthcare professionals throughout South Florida, will be published on October 26th. So make sure you save the date of when you need to pick that up. In the meantime, you can definitely visit miamediagroup.com to learn more about all of the upcoming events. Make sure you tune in on Wednesdays at 7 to learn about all things fashion, pop culture, and so much more with Nikki Soul, who's the host of Legacy Soul. So that should be fun. But make sure you guys tune in every week. Mark your calendar. Again, thank you, President Haile, for joining us today. I look forward to continue to see the work that you're doing with Broward College. Of course, I look forward to working under your leadership with Leadership Florida this year. I know we have some great things in store, and I know we've had to pivot with just everything happening and taking things virtual. So hopefully we'll be able to be back in person together soon.
I'm looking forward to that day, trust me.
Absolutely. So everyone, please share this video. And again, mark your calendars, and we'll see you next Thursday at noon.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you.